Okay. So this lecture is actually a new lecture that there's only one precedent for this lecture, and that was in Turkey, thanks to Tufan. And this lecture is entitled Longitudinal Wave Science, Understanding the Deep Mysteries of Both Physics and Spirituality. We're going to unpack many lessons from longitudinal wave science, sometimes incorrectly called scalar or torsional. The subtitle of this lecture is called Dear Mr. Einstein, it is in fact fatal to be stuck below the speed of light. And we're going to discuss the physics of that, because that is in fact where he got stuck. Much that we love his work, and there's all kind of beautiful stuff there, but there are some serious issues that prevent us from understanding not only psychokinesis and our own spirituality, but the very mechanism of the universe, the core mechanism of the universe. And I am passionate about this, and I'm actually going to dedicate this lecture to Tom Bearden, who correctly said that only longitudinal waves heal, only longitudinal waves do action at a distance, and longitudinal waves are in fact the mechanism behind therapy and all healing electromagnetics, and they're the key to longitudinal waves, and we're going to show you pictures of what that means in a moment. They are the key to perfect embedding, called phase conjugate or implosive. The longitudinal EMF is the cause of gravity, and the cause of gravity waves, and the mechanism of gravity waves. It is the cause of charge implosion and all neg entropy and self-organization, the title of my book. And the equation is in color on the inside cover, and they're here, and they're $20. It's the physics of alchemy. It is literally the geometry of the non-destructive charge collapse called isotope transition or fusion. It is the essence of non-destructive charge collapse. And remember, Einstein did correctly say that infinite non-destructive charge collapse was gravity, but of course he didn't know what a fractal was, and he also didn't know what a longitudinal, or certainly what a faster than light wave was. And we're going to see that that's also how you get through death. So listen carefully. Okay. So it is the mechanism of all superluminal, faster than light, and all action at a distance. And again, we're not picking on Einstein today, we're loving him. But Einstein said all action at a distance, his name for it was spooky. Why did he call it spooky? Because he was stuck below the speed of light. It's actually true, and so we're going to explain and show you the wave mechanics. This is called conjugate interferometry. Interferometry just means how waves interfere. And to conjugate them, to implode them, is a mechanism for launching them. And that creates action at a distance in a way we're going to describe. And that is the key to remote plasma, remote heat containment. That is the holy grail of all plasma research, plasma fusion research on this planet. Every plasma research project on this planet has one simple problem: how to contain the heat. Your brain has one simple problem: how to contain the heat. And we call that flame in mind. It is the name of our brainwave software, because we teach how Ingo Swann heated that thermistor with his mind at a distance through a Faraday cage repeatedly. He lit a flame with his mind exactly the way every Cherokee and Bonpo Tibetan shaman is tested to see if in fact they're an initiate, to light a flame with your mind. And that's real physics, and you need to understand it because it is the way through death. So it is the physics of the mechanism of nanopowder, nanogold, nanomaterials, is mechanism of superconductivity as a perfected implosive waveguide. And this is where we do the little trick that Nassim later started teaching as well, but actually Tom Sawyer developed this with me in Buffalo. The mechanism of superconductivity is correctly when the jitterbug from cube octa to icosa creates that golden spiral path. And when it's in the icosa geometry, as you'll see, it creates this path to center, and that is the mechanism of superconductivity. And that's very cool, because when the lightning hit Daniel Brinkley twice and he died and wrote the books about death, after he woke up, everyone he touched, he saw every emotion in their life. And we know exactly how the lightning did that to his DNA. We know the geometry. The same way the one thread of DNA becomes a superconductor when you zap it with lightning is also true of a gold nanofilament, and it's also true of a carbon nanofilament. And they all have the same geometry we're going to discuss. And I speak from experience because a lifetime of Kundalini is like living in the center of a lightning bolt. And a lightning bolt center, called ball lightning, is famously, ball lightning responds very well to telepathy, as Paul intimated, and our partner George Edgley in Budapest tells those stories. So it is also the key to nuclear critical mass is charge implosion. When Bruce Cathy showed that the nuclear critical mass depended on the magnetic line cross points. This was a top-level military secret. Oh, nuclear critical mass changes if you go to the cross point. The same cross point that enables longitudinal embedding. The same cross point that is the only way the Kozyrev mirror works. The same cross point that helps the Therify work because of longitudinal embedding. The same magnetic line cross point that broadcasts longitudinal waves you call ancestral memory. So you need to understand the mechanics, because if you want to call your ancestors, as every indigenous people knew is the purpose of life. So you need to understand the mechanism of the collective unconscious, the communion of saints, ancestral memory, and that is the mechanism. I tell you, it is how to design a hospital, how to design a burial ground, and how to design where to be born. So it is the physics of coherent death, quite literally the geometry you see before your death, you die, called the Clouvet form constants, the subject of tomorrow's lecture, is literally your DNA arranging itself to implode to do this, because if you don't get longitudinal, remember our old bumper sticker, it said get fractal or get dead. We have a new one. It says get longitudinal or get dead. And it's quite literally true. So when you're able to put your attention, and you change your attention geometry from the up and down motion of the transverse to the longitudinal wave, what the Egyptians called the ba from the ka. The ba was a superluminal component that pressed like a seed from the husk, from the coherence of the aura called your ka, which is your simple standard capacitive field, what Steiner called etheric formative force. So that is your conventional aura. The amount of coherence there is your boat into the underworld, your ka. But the amount that squeezes like a seed from the husk, as the Egyptian described it, is precisely the ability to put your attention onto the longitudinal from the transverse, and we're going to explain that. And that movement of the geometry of attention is literally the ability to lucid dream, which obviously predicts if you're going to die well. So give attention, right? And this is the physics of magic. It is literally about how you cast a spell. When Alan and Teresa are going to explain, actually I think tomorrow night, in the physics of magic, and they throw the magnetic domains. Oh, here's my donut. I happen to have a donut. But you visualize the Hebrew letter, right? And the Hebrew letter we now know is just the tilt of the donut, the magnetic domain. So you're blowing smoke rings at accurate angles, and that's called Hebrew and Sanskrit. You visualize those letters in correct opposing pairs, called four-wave mixing in physics, and in angelic magic called the sacred four directions. Then the donuts implode at the center because they conjugate and become centripetal, and it blows the doors off the church. The air pressure changes dramatically in the room, and we know exactly why. And that implosion of charge is called casting a spell. Remember, that's a dream spell in that sense. So the spell is the centripetal force generated by the conjugate field at center. That's the point. So now what we're seeing is we can understand all the physics and all the metaphysics with one simple idea. And that's why I'm here today, so you can visualize that accurately, then you're empowered. So this is a spin path, and we have our latest little 3D model here. We got our 3D printer powered up, and we printed a big one. Remember, I wrote the equation for that spiral on that vortex, which makes perfect 3D fractality dodecaconstellation called Star Mother Kit, which I later proved by equation is the geometry of hydrogen, literally, perfectly fractal. DNA, Earth grid, zodiac, and all that cool stuff. So if you take that spiral path to center and 3D model it on a cone, perfect implosion, we call Schauberger's dream. And then when the water is piezoelectric, it becomes implosive, and so seeds growing next to that vortex grow faster even if they don't get that water. That is called a bioactive field because it's centripetal and implosive, and it is the centripetal force itself which makes it bioactive. So what creates the centripetal force is the ability to become longitudinal. And that's what we want to explain visually to you right now. So you can do what Dorothy did. Was that the yellow brick road to Oz? Oh, maybe it was the emerald crystal. So down that cone, what's happening is, first we have our cute little animation, so you know what transverse and longitudinal is. Here's our cute little animation. So this, all of the electromagnetic communications you do, your radio, your telephone, your cell phone, all these gadgets around you, they use this part of the electromagnetic wave to communicate. All the information is modulated on here, called transverse EMF, transverse electromagnetic field. It's going up and down, right? Now when you have a tsunami, a certain amount of that energy is converted into a longitudinal because it goes up the spiral on the coast. The slope of the coast converts the inertia from this to this. And it's how that works efficiently, called phase conjugation, that creates longitudinal, and therefore is the doorway, the portal, the doorway to the underworld. So here, on the other hand, is a longitudinal wave. Now notice how a longitudinal wave is compressional. So this wave can push symmetrically from opposite sides. Supposing you were hugging a baby. You know what that feels like? You don't go like this, do you? No, you go like this. And that is the true for the nucleus of the cell and the nucleus of the atom. The first nuclear device was called implosion because critical mass is actually the ability to convey the pressure longitudinally, symmetrically at center, to drive the inertia down the cone through the speed of light at the threshold of the Planck dimension. And that's what Einstein missed. Speed of light is not a speed limit. It's a quantum threshold defined by the Planck dimension. So that when that cone is reached, what happens is, now let's go back to our first picture. The inertia is going up and down like this, right? That's transverse EMF. If it enters this path called yellow brick road, called a golden spiral on a cone, which in physics, if you study the golden spiral in hydrodynamics class, they name it optimized translation of vorticity, and this is what they mean. The vorticity, otherwise known as making the L or phase shift, as in Elohim, right? You have made the L between here and here. The ability to do that phase coherently is the ability of your aura to get through there. And when you can do that, you can lucid dream and take memory into death. And you can do remote viewing, and you can do remote healing, which the Therapy is actually famous for. It's better if you plan at magnetic cross points and if you understand this a little bit, but it's not a mystery. So Mr. Einstein, sorry, it's not spooky. And we are here to tell you how that works. So what happened is the inertia is going up and down here as it enters this cone. It's going up and down, right? Now, if that inertia starts in this cone going up and down like this, okay, now what's happening as it goes down that cone? Watch. The inertia is changing from an up and down motion without loss of inertia, without loss of charge. Remember the basics here. The universe is comprised of a single contiguous compressible media, sometimes called the ether, and that is the compressibility of charge, which universally behaves like a liquid, and there's no other definition for a unified field. Therefore, when that charge rotates, it stores some inertia, which is the only definition of mass. And when that charge rotates, it has a period, which is the only definition of time. So Einstein was actually wrong to say you bent space-time. More accurately, what's happened is the path of charge is being bent towards center because of this, which is named the gravity, and let me explain. So when the inertia enters up here, going up and down, and the inertia is translated coherently in vorticity down to the tip of that cone, it emerges here as a compressional longitudinal wave with no loss of memory, no loss of inertia, no loss of charge, no loss of energy. And when that happens, it only happens when the pine cones kiss accurately at the Planck dimension, which is how we started the Therapy and the frequency equation that built it, which is these peaks right here. So now the inertia has reached the Planck dimension and it's squeezed out through the speed of light at that threshold, which is why the Planck dimension defines the sacred. And we're going to see the only definition of sacred units of dimension are Planck times golden ratio for this reason, which is also my new equation for hydrogen. So, what happens when the wave is now longitudinal compressional and went through the speed of light? Where in here is the everywhere at once phenomenon? Well, when they first proved, and I'll dig up the slide in a bit, when they first proved that to catch a gravity wave, you did not need a $1 million Weber transducer, you needed a 30-cent capacitor to measure gravity waves, Hodowanek and Ramsey. And when the Princeton Noosphere project tells you, well, our transducer is a mystery, we call it a Josephson junction. No, it's capacitive coupling, it's very simple. They're picking up longitudinal waves. So you need to understand how that works in order to understand the action at a distance principle. And that's, as I say, why we're here. So non-destructive charge collapse is the key. That's implosion. Now here are the visuals that are the background. So that's the intro, that's the core concept. And we have a series of visuals that are designed to kind of enrich that notion. So many of you have seen that our websites are fractalfield.com, fractalu.com, therify.net, as you know, fractal implosive conjugate charge collapse. Remember, this is the only possible definition of fractality. I tell you, self-similarity optimized, named golden ratio, is the only possible definition of fractality. Therefore, this is the only possible definition of a fractal field.com. And you will see later the only possible definition of the Holy Grail story, which we may tell you if we have time. You know, we have a new little play on words there, a little pieces of that puzzle. So, oh, we missed our little flame animation. Oh, we got to do that one. It's so fun. There, it's working. It's working. Is that a flame in the mind? So those sine waves are at golden ratio. Many of you have seen my little 3D animations before. So this is that spiral on the cone. You see what's happening here is, and we've explained this many times, when you use this, which is the top-down view of DNA, obviously, but also the top-down view of every living protein, and I later proved the top-down view of hydrogen, the center of every bond in your DNA and water, that waves add and multiply recursively, constructively, perfected heterodyning, not just the wavelengths, but the phase velocity. Remember, you're coming down that cone, the waves are adding and multiplying the phase velocity, the wavefront speed. So this is the only possible form of compression that produces acceleration out of perfected compression. Do you get it? If you compress this way, Einstein knew that every mystery is perfect compression. Every computer scientist knows that every mystery is perfect compression. Every architect knows that every mystery is perfect compression. Every social scientist, every alchemist. Perfect compression is the solution to everything. And this is the only solution to that. And so what's happening is the phase velocities add and multiply recursively. So what enters as charge in rotation, that charge experiences acceleration due to only healings of cancer in history, I think. Thousands of cancers healed. Problem? Nobody knew how it worked. That's a detail. Unfortunately, you can't optimize, you can't perfect, you can't define. So the whole effort collapsed. So the day that Paul and I decided to build the Therify is the day we're going through Tom Bearden's documentation of the Priori literature, and there's lots and lots, and it's all at therify.net. The entire history of Antoine Priori is there, therify.net/static, you'll see it there. And sure enough, Priori's been putzing around and he gets his frequencies, his magic recipe from Paul's lecture just now, Lakowski, Tesla, I missed somebody. Rife, yes, thank you, Rife, exactly. So he got his magic recipe together, and yes, everything is frequencies. And by the way, the best frequencies in the low range, the harmonics, the key frequencies that made Antoine Priori work, 3 hertz, 10 hertz, 32 hertz, 80 hertz. And I'm scratching my head over here and looking at my equation for a minute. I said, oh look, bingo, 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 bingo. Well, now there's a new publication out called An Examination of All the Frequencies That Heal Cancer. And the new link, I'll dig up the picture in a minute, I'll get it out. There's and about half of those studies, and there's hundreds of studies on what frequencies heal cancer. And about half of them Literally, there's like a lot of them are at 1 hertz, which by the way fits here, and a lot of, but the majority, the most published studies on what frequencies heal cancer, guess what frequency it is? It's so cool. You'll never guess. You'll just never guess. It's 50 hertz. I'm serious. And I'll give you another little clue. So the people I'm working with doing the world-class nanocarbon technology, how to implode the nanocarbons and make magic 32 times stronger than steel, and 3/4 of every industry on the planet is obsolete today. And it's working already, so sorry. Propulsion, water purification, energy, everything. So how do you grow the nanocarbon? Well, they did some studies in their lab and they just concluded they cannot do it in America. Can you guess why? 60 hertz. It's a scream, isn't it? Sort of makes you laugh, actually. And so if you do the equation for 49.97 ... comes right out of the equation. You see, my family business, that's another story. My family business started the day that Buffalo, New York had to rewind every motor in the city to change from 25 to 60 hertz because Tesla thought 1800 RPM was convenient for ... We rewounded every electric motor in the city of Buffalo from 25 to 60 hertz. That's my family history, actually, and how I became the lead engineer in electrical and built phase converters. Anyway, it was all about this story. So I carry on.